There is this really specific modern ritual that I think we are all pretty guilty of.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so you wake up, you are maybe halfway through your first cup of coffee, brain isn't really fully online yet, and you open your phone
Right.
and you just start the scroll. And amidst, the photos of your cousin's wedding and the random political arguments, you stop on a video.
It is always the videos that stop the scroll.
No, every time. And usually it is this really shaky footage shot from a car passing on the highway. And the subject is literally always the same. It is a vehicle on the side of the road, absolutely engulfed in flames.
Yeah, looking less like a car and more like a bonfire.
Exactly, just a total inferno. And recently, almost without fail, the caption or the headline attached to that video screams something like electric vehicle fire or battery disaster.
It is a very visceral image. I mean, it triggers that immediate fight or flight response in the lizard brain. You see fire, you think danger. It is evolutionarily hardwired into us.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And lately, I feel like I am seeing that specific headline everywhere. It gets to the point where you start thinking, man, are these things just ticking time bombs? It creates this genuine sense of panic. Like, if I buy an EV, am I parking a literal fire hazard in my garage next to where my kids sleep?
And that is exactly the panic we need to talk about today.
Yeah.
Because what you are experiencing there is a classic textbook case of the availability heuristic.
The availability heuristic.
Right. You see the dramatic instances because they are shared, clicked, and promoted by algorithms. You just assume they are the norm. But when we actually look at the data, the boring, unsexy spreadsheets behind all those flashy headlines, the reality is wildly different.
And that is exactly why I'm so excited for today's deep dive. We are going to do something that feels a little bit rebellious in 2026.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
We are taking a step back. We are going to stop doom scrolling and actually start analyzing. So we have got this fantastic source today. It is an article titled "The Great Car Fire Panic: A Calm Look at the Data Nobody Clicked For." Such a great title.
Isn't it? It is by Sherry Hartlen-Neely, published on Jory Pepper Communications just last month, January 6th, 2026.
I really love that title. The data nobody clicked for. Because frankly, safety statistics remain consistent isn't exactly a headline that goes viral.
No,
it doesn't get the retweets.
No, it definitely does not. But our mission today is to zoom out for you, the listener. Instead of looking at isolated, scary incidents, we are looking at the entire U.S. vehicle fleet. We are talking millions and millions of cars.
Right.
And we want to answer three massive questions. One, how often do fires actually happen? Two, which cars are actually catching fire? And three, how does the sheer number of gas cars on the road skew our perception of reality?
It really is an exercise in critical thinking and statistical literacy. We're going to look at the numerator, which is the fires, and the denominator, which is the total cars. You simply cannot understand the risk without knowing both of those numbers. Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with the landscape. Setting the denominator, as you said. Before we talk about things burning down, we need to know what is actually driving on American roads right now. What are we dealing with here?
We absolutely need to set that denominator, because if we don't know how many cars are out there, the number of fires just means nothing in a vacuum.
Right.
According to the data snapshot from November 2024 cited in our source, there were approximately 286 million registered motor vehicles in the United States.
286 million. Let's just pause on that for a second. That is a staggering amount of metal on the road.
It is massive. That is almost one vehicle for every single person in the country, though obviously, the distribution isn't exactly one-to-one.
Sure.
And that number covers everything. Passenger sedans, massive pickup trucks, buses, motorcycles. Basically, if it has a license plate and an engine, it is in that bucket.
Okay, so nearly 300 million vehicles. Now, living in a tech bubble or a major coastal city, I think it's really easy to assume that EVs are just taking over the world.
Oh, for sure.
You see Teslas everywhere, you see Rivians at the grocery store, but the powertrain breakdown tells a very different story, doesn't it?
It does. And this is where the context is so essential. Despite all the hype, despite the Super Bowl commercials, and despite this transition we are currently living through, the internal combustion engine, or ICE, is still the overwhelming majority.
How overwhelming?
We are talking about roughly 94% of the entire fleet.
Wow.
Yeah. That is somewhere between 270 and 272 million vehicles running on gasoline or diesel.
94%. So for every 100 cars you pass on the highway, 94 of them are burning gas.
Precisely. The infrastructure, the history, the sheer inertia of the automotive market,
Yeah.
I just still very much a gas-powered world.
And the rest. Because we hear so much about the EV revolution, you would really expect that number to be a bit higher.
Well, you have to break down that remaining 6%.
Okay.
You have self-charging hybrids, the HEVs making up about 4%, which is around 10 to 11 million vehicles. These are your standard Priuses, the ones you don't plug into a wall.
Right, the ones that have been around for like 20 years now.
Exactly. Then you have plug-in hybrids or PHEVs sitting at about 1%, representing 2 to 3 million cars. These are sort of the bridge technology, a gas engine plus a plug.
Got it. And the battery electric vehicles, the BEVs, the ones we are supposedly so terrified of right now.
They're sitting at roughly 1 to 1.3%.
Really?
Yeah, that is about 3.5 to 3.8 million vehicles total.
So purely by the raw numbers, fully electric cars are still a tiny, tiny slice of the pie. Literally about 1 in 100.
Correct. And this is the critical first step in this whole exercise. If 94% of the cars on the road are ICE vehicles, then statistically, you should expect the vast majority of everything that happens on the road to involve an ICE vehicle.
Right. Most speeding tickets, most flat tires, most fender benders.
And crucially, most fires. If the distribution of fires doesn't roughly match the distribution of vehicles, that is when you actually have an anomaly. But you have to start with the baseline that gas cars own the road. If you see a car on the side of the interstate, the absolute safest bet you can make is that it has a gas tank.
Okay, so we have our denominator clearly set. 286 million vehicles, heavily dominated by gas. Now, let's get to the heat, the numerator.
Let's do it.
How many cars actually caught fire in 2024?
Based on the estimates in the report, which is combining National Fire Protection Association totals with that registered fleet data, we're looking at approximately 211,500 vehicle fires in the U.S. for the year 2024.
Okay, over 200,000 fires. I have to be honest, that is actually more than I expected. That is a lot of fires. That's like, what, over 500 fires a day?
It is a significant number when you just look at it in pure isolation. It sounds like a total crisis, but remember the denominator. We have 286 million vehicles. So while 200,000 fires sounds huge, it is actually less than 0.1% of the total fleet.
Okay, that definitely puts it in perspective. Most people will go their entire lives without their car ever catching fire.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really fascinating. We need to break down which cars made up that 211,500. This is the data point that completely breaks the media narrative.
This is the moment of truth. This is the big myth-busting moment for you listening. So of those 200,000 plus fires, how many were gas cars?
ICE vehicles accounted for 90.2% of all vehicle fires.
90.2%. Okay. That tracks pretty closely with them being 94% of the road, right? Maybe a tiny bit under-indexed, but generally speaking, gas cars are doing the vast majority of the burning.
Absolutely. If you see black smoke on the horizon, it is overwhelmingly likely to be a combustion engine.
Now, what about the hybrids? Because I feel like they totally fly under the radar in this whole debate.
They do fly under the radar, but the data suggests maybe they shouldn't. Self-charging hybrids accounted for 7.9% of the fires.
Wait, 7.9%? But didn't you just say they are only 4% of the fleet?
That is correct.
So they are 4% of the cars on the road, but they represent nearly 8% of the fires. That is almost double their share. That seems really high.
It is a statistical overrepresentation, yes. And plug-in hybrids showed a very similar trend. They accounted for 1.9% of fires, while being roughly 1% of the fleet. So hybrids, generally speaking, are appearing in the fire data almost twice as often as their population would suggest.
That is really interesting. Do we have a definitive why for that, or is it just a weird quirk of the data?
The source doesn't definitively pinpoint a single mechanical cause, but there is a very plausible hypothesis involving complexity.
Okay.
Think about it. Inside a hybrid, you have a gasoline engine with all the fuel lines, hot exhaust manifolds, and oil, and you also have a high-voltage battery system and electric motors.
Ah, you are cramming two completely different propulsion systems into one chassis.
Exactly. You have significantly more failure points. You have the intense heat of the combustion engine sitting right next to high-voltage electronics. And in engineering, complexity is often the enemy of reliability.
That makes total sense. It is like the turducken problem. You just have too many things stuffed inside one thing.
Right.
But now, let's look at the number I think everyone is waiting for. The battery electric vehicles. The ones generating all those terrifying TikToks and headlines.
Hit me.
What is the percentage?
Battery electric vehicles accounted for 0.2% of all vehicle fires.
0.2%.
0.2%.
That is minuscule. That is practically a rounding error.
As Hartlen-Neely puts it in the source, BEVs account for only a few hundredths of a percent of all vehicle fires nationwide.
This is honestly mind-blowing. I mean, think about the sheer disparity here. If you just watch the news, you would think it was 50-50. Or maybe the EVs were actually more likely to burn. But the data says they are barely even on the chart compared to gas cars.
And this right here is why we do the deep dive. This is the aha moment.
Hmm.
When you actually adjust for exposure, meaning you look at the number of fires relative to the number of vehicles actually on the road, the risk profile of an EV looks completely different from the panic narrative.
So wait, I want to play devil's advocate for just a second here. Does this mean EV fires basically never happen? Like, are they perfectly 100% safe?
No, and I want to be very clear about that. The data does not say EV fires never happen. They do. 0.2% of 211,500 is still roughly 400 fires.
Okay.
That is 400 real, actual incidents in a year. And when they do happen, they can be very different from a standard gas fire.
How so?
Well, they can be much more difficult to extinguish because of the battery chemistry itself. We are talking about something called thermal runaway, where the battery essentially generates its own heat and its own oxygen.
Wow.
Yeah, so firefighters often need significantly more water and a lot more time to put out an EV fire than a gas fire. That raw intensity is part of why they make for such dramatic viral video.
Right, it looks like a massive chemical flare going on.
Exactly. But the key point here is probability versus severity. An EV fire might be harder to put out, that is the severity, but the likelihood of it happening in the first place, the probability, is incredibly low compared to a gas car.
It is the difference between possible and probable. Like, anything is possible, but is it actually likely to happen to you?
Precisely. And we have to ask ourselves, why do cars catch fire in the first place? The source makes a really great point here. Cars are machines.
Right.
It doesn't matter what powers them, they are complex machines moving at very high speeds.
Yeah. The report lists the common causes, right? Collisions, fuel leaks, electrical faults, overheating components, poor maintenance.
Exactly. If you smash literally any vehicle into a concrete wall at 60 miles per hour, there's a serious risk of fire. If you don't maintain your vehicle, if you let hoses crack and wires fray over years and years, there is a risk of fire.
I really like the analogy I was thinking of earlier regarding this everyday danger concept. We are just so used to gas cars. We literally drive around sitting on top of 15 gallons of highly flammable liquid explosive.
And we are completely desensitized to it. Think about it. A fuel leak in an ICE car is a fairly common mechanical issue. You smell gas, you take it to the shop. It happens all the time. It might cause a fire, but because there are 270 million gas cars out there, a gas car fire is just Tuesday.
It's background noise.
It is literally a traffic update. Traffic is backed up on I-95 due to a vehicle fire. You hear that on the morning radio and you don't think, oh my God, the internal combustion technology is fundamentally failing?
No.
You just think, oh, I'm going to be 10 minutes late for work.
But if a Tesla or a Rivian catches fire...
Stop the presses.
Exactly.
It is a novelty.
Yeah.
Because BEVs are only 1% of the fleet, seeing one burn is rare. It's unusual. And news media, by definition, thrives on the unusual.
It is the classic man bites dog theory of journalism, right? A dog biting a man isn't news, but a man biting a dog is a front-page headline.
Exactly. Gas car catches fire is dog bites man. It happens literally hundreds of times a day across the entire country. Future tech robot car catches fire is man bites dog. It perfectly fits a narrative of new technology is dangerous, and it gets clicks.
And that exact mechanism is what creates the panic we talked about at the top of the show. We see the one anomaly on our phones, and because we don't see the 100,000 boring gas fires, we assume the anomaly is the rule.
Which brings us right back to the vital importance of the denominator. Without knowing that there are 286 million cars and 94% are gas, you cannot contextualize the news story you are seeing. You are reacting to the numerator without the denominator.
It is like judging the safety of air travel by only looking at plane crashes and completely ignoring the millions of flights that land safely every single day.
That is a perfect analogy. If you only watch the evening news, you would never set foot on a plane. But when you look at the fleet data for aviation, you realize it is the safest way to travel. The exact same logic applies here.
So, let's pivot a bit here. We have established pretty clearly that the fire risk is statistically much lower for EVs than the panic suggests. But the article goes on to talk about what they call the holistic view. It is not just about fire, is it? It is about the whole experience of ownership.
That is right. The source argues that when you view fire risk, operating cost, and fleet size together, you get a much calmer, more rational picture of reality. It touches on safety, but also usability and cost.
One thing that stood out to me was the point about usability. We talk about range anxiety almost as much as we talk about battery fires, but the source mentions that average weekly driving habits already fit comfortably within the capabilities of most modern vehicles.
That is another area where human perception severely lags behind reality.
Mm.
Most people drive less than 40 miles a day. Modern EVs cover that easily, usually 5, 6, even 7 times over on a single charge. But just like with the fires, we fixate on the edge case.
The what if I need to drive 500 miles nonstop into the desert scenario?
Exactly. Rather than the daily reality of going to the office and the grocery store.
We shop for the exception, not the rule. We buy the car for the one road trip we take a year, not the commute we do 300 days a year.
Exactly. And that is fine if that is what you want to do with your money. But recognize it for what it is.
And then there is the cost aspect. We often just look at the sticker price on the lot and go, oh, EVs are way too expensive.
Right. And upfront, they often are more expensive. But the source emphasizes that ownership cost differences over time. Fuel versus charging at home, maintenance versus having zero oil changes, often matter more than the purchase price alone. When you factor in the significantly lower fire risk, which could eventually affect insurance premiums, the lower maintenance, and the energy costs, the calculation really changes.
But, and I do appreciate the expert balance in this article, the source isn't saying everyone must go buy an EV right now. This is not a sales pitch.
No, and that is a crucial nuance we need to highlight. The data does not suggest there is a single correct vehicle choice for every human being. We all have wildly different needs. Do you have a driveway to charge in? That is a huge factor. Do you tow a heavy boat every weekend?
What is your actual budget? Can you afford the upfront cost?
Exactly. If you live in a dense apartment complex with zero chargers and you drive 400 miles a day for work, an EV might not be for you, regardless of how good the fire stats are.
Right. It is not about ideology. It is about utility.
The point isn't to evangelize for EVs. The point is that these decisions should be grounded in context, not fear. If you choose not to buy an EV because it doesn't fit your lifestyle, that is a perfectly rational decision. But if you choose not to buy one because you are terrified it will spontaneously combust in your driveway, that is a decision based on misinformation.
It is about removing the panic from the equation so you can actually make a clear-headed choice for yourself.
Precisely. We want to empower you, the listener, to look past the sensationalism. When you are standing on that dealer lot or scrolling through listings online, we want you to see the machine for what it is: metal, rubber, and energy storage, not some monster waiting to attack you.
So what does this all mean for you? Let's recap the big takeaways from our deep dive today.
First, remember the sheer scale. We have a fleet of nearly 300 million vehicles. 94% of them are gas-powered. That is the ocean we are swimming in.
Second, the fire stats themselves. Over 200,000 fires in 2024. But when you break it down, EVs, the ones taking all the heat in the press, accounted for only 0.2% of those incidents.
That is the number to hold on to today, 0.2%. The massive disparity between that tiny number and the volume of news coverage is the literal definition of novelty bias.
And finally, don't let the headlines drive your life choices. Whether it is cars or health scares or the economy, always ask for the denominator.
That is the ultimate call to action here. Whenever you see a scary number or a terrifying video on your feed, ask yourself, out of how many? What is the base rate? If you can find the denominator, you can usually find the truth. It turns the monster back into a shadow.
It really is a superpower, the ability to just zoom out. It makes the world a much less scary place.
It is the perfect antidote to panic.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought, something derived from the source's conclusion that has been really sticking with me since I read it. We have spent this whole time talking about cars. But think about this.
Great.
If our decisions about a $40,000 purchase are being so heavily driven by headlines rather than actual data, what other major life choices are we making based on panic rather than probability?
Oh, wow. That is a very uncomfortable question. Are we choosing where to live, how to invest our money, or even how to parent our kids based on the 1 in a million anomaly we saw on the news, rather than the everyday reality?
Something to mull over on your next drive, whether that is in a gas car, a hybrid, or an EV. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Drive safe, everyone.
See you next time.